I would like to introduce our second speaker, James, Mr. James Yu. James is the council member of the Institute of Material, Mineral and Mining Hong Kong branch. He is also the business development manager of Alliance Construction Material, focusing on the concrete and wall product supply in Hong Kong. He has over 14 years of experience in the industry, designing supply chain solutions that meet the market needs. He collaborates with internal and external leaders to help enhance business performance in a sustainable way. Today, his presentation title is The Way Forward for Low Carbon Construction Material. Yeah, welcome, James. I pass the mic to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. Today, I will be presenting on the topic of the future of low carbon construction materials. Because nowadays, the needs for sustainability and carbon reductions have become increasingly important. And a lot of the companies have incorporated sustainable practices in their operations. And actually, the need for carbon reductions have also sparked a new wave of innovations in new products and also manufacturing optimizations. So I'm going to touch on two major questions. The first one is, what role do you think construction materials can play on the general decarbonization of the society? And also the second question would be how we are going to be able to make the material sustainable itself so that it can really be applied in more buildings to fulfill these sustainable objectives. To begin with, we will have to look at our share of emissions and energy consumptions on the total emissions of all the industries. Actually, construction materials productions and construction works occupy quite a large sum of the emissions. And I can also tell that a lot of our emissions are actually hiding behind other sectors, for example, in transportation as well. So by taking our own initiatives to lower our embodied carbons and operational carbons from manufacturing materials, we will be able to bring down the emissions of other sectors as well. And to build on from Professor Zheng's idea, actually, to reduce the carbon emissions, there are clearly two major directions. The first one is, of course, to reduce the embodied carbons from the manufacturing of materials and application of materials that is on the construction site. And secondly, there's also another emerging direction is to align the materials properties with the long-term valuation strategy. That because you can see the periodical peak of portion 3 from the chart there, they are the emissions from the major valuation work conducted along the life of the building. And after the major valuation work would be the second highest source of carbon emissions. So if the material properties itself is good enough to be strong and durable, it would allow the building designer to have a better building design that may reduce the need of major refurbishment along the service life. And there are also new materials that will enable maybe the reductions of the operation carbons, for example, to improve the heat insulation of the building, etc., so that the energy efficiency of the building can be improved. And to determine where we can reduce CO2 or who has the responsibility to reduce CO2, we need to get used to see the building sector in this full value chain perspective. Yeah, because the building sector is not a single sector, it's instead a full value chain or full supply chain, from the extraction of raw materials to manufacturing of construction materials to building use and to end of life. Yeah, because nowadays in the reality, a lot of material suppliers still find it hard to justify their green solutions or green product design to buyers or building designers. Because a lot of the time, the green materials will involve the change of supply change and the change of people's old practices. And it inevitably will involve a little bit higher cost. So if the entire economy can look at the building sector in this full value perspective, then we may be able to determine who has the responsibility and who will enjoy the benefits and be able to pass the benefits from one to the other and share some of the initial cost involved in the green materials development and also green material applications. And to fulfill that goal, just in line with the COP27 of the Paris Climate Agreement, we need to enhance the transparency and accountability of the carbon emissions in the full value chain. And a lot of companies have begun to use this methodology to assess their positions. We Alliance, as a concrete producer, we operate in our Scope 1 and Scope 2 because we batch the ready-mix concrete and supply to the main contractor and therefore to the building. And it means that if we take our responsibility seriously, we will need to work on our Scope 1 and Scope 2 to optimize the process so as to reduce the emissions. And we certainly will have a responsibility to also work on our Scope 3, because concrete producers nowadays will have up to 90% of Scope 3 carbon emission carry forward from the raw materials producer. So we will really have to have a macroscopic plan to reduce Scope 1, 2, and 3 in order to have a really low embodied carbons. And to reduce our emissions, I think many companies would have a carbon reduction blueprint. Here's an example from Alliance Construction Materials. Of course, first of all, we will need to assess the carbon footprints of our products. Because we have a range of product mix design, we need to know the carbon impact of them to the environment. And then from the carbon footprints, we will be able to assess the opportunity for improvement on our manufacturing process or logistic process. And then we will be able to reduce our Scope 1 and 2. And actually, our green management systems is designed from the finding of our carbon footprint of our products. And we set ourselves a science-based target initiative to reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 30% before 2030 as compared to 2018. And in 2022, we have successfully reduced the carbon emissions of Scope 1 by 30% already, and Scope 2 emissions by 23%, which is a pretty significant amount because it is almost 1/3 of our total emissions. And then we would have to work with our suppliers as well, because I think everyone will agree that it is really important to have good supplier that can be your partner to really reduce your Scope 3 because it constitutes such a huge part of our total emissions. And it is particularly important in the building construction materials industry because a lot of materials are actually prescriptive in specifications. The supplier cannot just change the mix design or production method without the approval from the project engineer and the building designer. So we have to promote the green application together with our raw material supplier so that the materials can be put in the specification more, and then we can really reduce the Scope 3 emission more. And yeah, therefore we only source our products from good supplier who also have a high ambitions in their green agenda, and also from quarries that pay sufficient attention on their extraction of materials, because we need to make sure that while they extract the products to us, they also pay sufficient attention on protecting the environment and reduce pollutions. And we need to be able to change the origins of the raw materials so that we really have a track record for carbon footprint. And of course, we will need to resolve the pain point of contractor and also the green agenda of the building industry. Therefore, a lot of the construction material supplier would have their range of green products, and for ourselves, we have a range called the value-added products. For example, we have a concrete mix called the super pump grid, which is very easy to pump and self-leveling. It may be able to reduce the pumping energy consumed during the construction work so that the embodied carbon from the construction work can be reduced. We also have a foam concrete, which is pretty good in the heat insulations and noise insulation properties. It may be able to improve the energy efficiency of the building. And also we encourage the use of recycled materials, and also encourage the use of beneficial use of excavated materials from civil projects to encourage the circular economy. And after all the efforts we pay to reduce the Scope 1, 2, and 3, then we cannot avoid some carbons that emitted from the source of manufacturing and transportations and construction. Yeah, because it's raw materials, there must be extraction activities and manufacturing activities. So to account for these unavoidable carbons, there's a program called the Carbon Neutrality Program, which is getting more popular nowadays in the marketplace, to let the contractor or the developer to offset those unavoidable carbons by purchasing carbon credits from carefully selected VCS projects. It basically involves a few key steps. First of all, of course, you need to do the quantifications of the carbon emissions from the construction materials to be consumed and also the construction method to be used. And then second, you make the declarations of carbon reductions. And third, to purchase the carbon credit from those VCS projects to offset the unavoidable carbons. And finally, do the auditing and verification, and then to achieve a declaration of achievement. Basically, we encourage our contractor to participate in such a carbon neutrality program so that they can incorporate, beside concrete, more green materials into their development. At least we need to get ourselves ready for participating in such a carbon neutrality program. And looking forward, we are actually hoping that there will be more proactive methods to reduce carbon. For example, we hope that in the future, there will be carbon capturing technology to let the fresh concrete or concrete in use or other product, construction product in use to capture the carbon dioxide in the ambience. We, of course, want to have better product design that will allow the building to have a better operating carbon. And finally, of course, we will need legislative support to take into account such a carbon reduction or carbon capturing initiative when it comes to assessing the carbon emissions of the building life cycle. And then we can really proactively attain carbon neutrality by 2050. Of course, in 2050, in the future. Yeah, concrete is still the most abundant and widely used construction materials for construction industry. But it is also promising to see that there are a lot of new materials that have a lower carbon dioxide impact being researched and promoted to the construction industry. We, for example, have bioclimatic materials where the contractor may just apply it after extraction without too much manufacturing on their building. We also have functional materials. For example, we have PV glass window that will allow the glass window itself to generate electricity, just like solar panel for the building. We also have recycled materials. So for example, recycled glass to replace aggregates so that the exploitation of natural resources can be reduced. And the wider application of them would depend on the property analysis. For example, the mechanical and thermal properties, the supply chain, whether it is easily accessible near the project site, so the construction practice, whether it is compatible with other construction materials or existing construction practices, and also, of course, whether the building regulation will approve them to be used in a more extensive scales. It will really depend on how the material supplier or developer tell a good low carbon stories to the society. And I think what we will increasingly see is the common language of CO2 in the life cycle of constructions, emerging both for us and also for other actors in the building life cycle. And with this common language, we will be able to move toward the carbon reduction goal in a more collaborative and effective way, because we need the entire value chain to move together to achieve that carbon reduction goal. The language will include, of course, more often the carbon calculator in the bottom left corner. The carbon calculator will allow the purchaser or the building designer to have an informed purchasing choice on the carbon impact of the material they choose for their buildings. And of course, there are a lot of certifications to certify that the materials has a low embodied carbon. And those certifications will be recognized by the entire economy so that the developer will have a chance to prove that their building would have a lower carbon footprint. And of course, we will have to promote and participate in the carbon neutrality program. And I would also like to advocate that beside a good materials, beside having a low embodied carbon, it is really important that it can also help the building to reduce the operating carbons in the use phase. For example, if the materials can improve the heat and noise insulation. It may enhance the energy efficiency of the building. And it is also worth revisiting some of the building principles. For example, how to enhance the use of natural lighting and natural ventilations, and how to ensure that the building is versatile in its application so that the need for major refurbishment work along the surface life of the building can be reduced, because refurbishment is the second highest source of carbon emissions. And actually, there are already established programs like the BEAM and LEED to take into account design factor together with material factor to take care of the energy use and make use of natural lighting and ventilations. And besides established program like the BEAM and LEED, there are also another options for material supplier and builders to use. For example, for materials who want to communicate better with their potential customers, who want to really move forward on their green agenda, they can use the Climate Action Plan 2050. It is actually a more comprehensive and ambitious program, but it is also very open and yet be very strict as BEAM and LEED that allow more actors or more material suppliers to participate in this climate action plan. Now, because we understand that in the material supply industries, there are still a lot of small to medium-sized companies and even startups. They will find it hard to put together their carbon data to participate in established programs like the BEAM and the LEED. So this program will allow them to validate their carbon reduction value in terms of opportunities, energy use, transportations, and circular economy. If they can validate their value, and as time goes on, when they get ready, and when they get more ready, they can put those newly developed standards into maybe building code or a more strict regulations, so that to move the entire industry toward a carbon reduction goal. Here are some of the examples of how we try to package our products or operations to be in line with the Climate Action Plan 2050. For example, we use a large capacity concrete mixer truck, which can reduce the emissions from concrete delivery to project sites. We also have some special products that can enhance the energy efficiency of the buildings. For example, we have a foam concrete, a high easy pump concrete, etc. And then we also have a decorative concrete that allow the architect to maybe put into some design factor by using concrete, so that they can reduce the total sum of construction materials. And we also promote the beneficial reuse of waste materials that enhance the circular economy. So I think up till now I have covered the very first question I raised. That is what roles materials can play in the decarbonization of the society. Of course, first we will have to be able to quantify our carbon impacts and support the project's carbon footprint codifications, because all the developer would maybe in the future would have to or would like to validate that they have a carbon footprint. They have a low carbon footprint. And then of course we will have to be able to support a better building design so that it can save emissions during the use phase and maybe more durable for more applications without the need of major refurbishment. And I would say that the focus for carbon reductions has been more on reducing the operating carbons of the building. But we are actually seeing the need to expand the perspective from only the operating carbons to also cover the entire building life cycle, for example, from the construction stage to the end of life. Therefore, it has to start from construction materials. And one major reason for that is that as we decarbonize the energy generation, electricity generations, I think the operating carbons of a building will reduce, and the proportions from construction materials and construction works will get larger and larger in the asset life cycle. So the future of construction materials will depend on our ability to tell a good low carbon story that based on facts. Therefore, we have to really get the opportunity to participate in some certification program to make sure that our product is really recognized as a low carbon products. And carbon reduction, I think, may sound like cliche nowadays because everyone is talking about carbon reductions and sustainability. But I think it just cannot be repeated sufficient enough because everyone in the industry has to understand that it should be the core value or the central elements of the business operations so that they can really come up with ideas to reduce their emissions. And it takes Alliance quite a long time and perseverance to adhere to that agenda until today and into the future. It is also very promising to see that many leaders in the construction material industry have started to take the responsibility to reduce their CO2 in line with their science-based target initiative and to meet with the 1.5-degree trajectory set out by the climate agreement. Actually, there are a lot of new opportunities ahead for all actors in the value chain to capture. I think everyone can play their parts by sharing the responsibilities so that they can enjoy the benefits brought about, and all of us will have a sustainable future. So I think I covered all my topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a lot of product, especially those kind of green product to be proposed. But I'm also in the past I doing procurement. Somehow the challenge for a buyer on green product is knowledge of the green product, cost of the green product, and also the supply chain transparency. They are always challenged. How can you tell the procurer that is all the products are really green, because you have a lot of green product that you mentioned, and the second is the cost. Somehow they are very concerned about. I think every company, include no matter they responsible for procurement, definitely concerned about cost. The third is about the supply chain transparency. Whether your product is really green or just mentioned, oh, it is a low carbon product, but it is just for some kind of greenwashing. How this three challenge you could help green procurement?
Yeah, Felix, you raise a pretty good questions. Yeah, because I think just I mentioned in my presentation, a lot of suppliers still find it difficult to verify their green efforts in their product. Okay. Because at the end of the day, they would need to make a sales so that they can sustain their green efforts and their business. And a lot of procurements in the construction industry, actually they are also passive, right? Because they need to follow the specifications and budgets to conduct their purchasing or choose the product they are going to purchase. So we really need to move the entire value chain together and validate the green benefits also to the building industry. Because at the end of the day, and actually nowadays, a lot of the projects is by competitive bidding, right? Yeah. Whoever bids the cheapest will get their contract, and then they can continue their business. But I think we really need to take the initiative to start from our own self, concrete producer or material supplier. Yeah, because if we let it take its natural course, we will never be able to get our product meet with the green agenda of the entire society. Yeah, because China and Hong Kong is one of the parties who agree or side on the Paris Climate Agreement, right? We will need to, for the most basic part is to verify our materials and get the industry to recognize their carbon reductions and then to participate in the green finance. But green finance is a pretty new thing I would say it is still a pretty new thing to the construction industry. Everyone is exploring whether they can benefit from the green finance if they apply some green initiative in their projects. Yeah, you really need pilot projects. Yeah, we have a lot of green products. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we are trying hard to promote to the industry and together with our upstream suppliers. Yeah, because just I mentioned, Scope 3 is one of our most serious source of carbon emissions. Just like what Professor Zhang mentioned, GGBS or cementitious replacement materials can reduce a lot of CO2. If the specification can put such initiative into the specification, and then the procurement can purchase according with the specifications, and then we can promote the green products.
Yeah.
So the whole supply chain need to move together.
Yeah.
If only myself to promote to you to a procurement manager, they may just bargain on a better price.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course, our green data would be validated and have green certifications. There are a lot of organizations helping the industry to do so.
Okay. Yeah, I think, sorry about that, the time is limited. Maybe I have to discuss with you off the webinar.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.